Good Friday evening to you. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Thanks for joining More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. We will talk some Ohio State Buckeyes, but we begin today with the Cleveland Browns. NFL football ramping up. The Browns have been out in Berea going through mostly strength and conditioning workouts, as well as installing a new offense and a defense during some walkthroughs. Now the strength and conditioning has been, for the most part, the big part of what the Browns are doing during this acclimation period, getting ready for what will be a full squad workout in about a week. They did find out, though, that 3 guards and 1 offensive tackle, 4 offensive linemen have opted out for the 2020 season due to the pandemic.
I think that's what Andrew and his staff are working on every day. I think they walk in the building and say, look at the roster, how do we improve it? So, I know with the opt-outs at that position, it's certainly something that we will continue to look at. As it pertains to practice reps, I mean, you have to get your starters ready. You also have to get your backups ready in this year. So we have to be very mindful of how we divvy up those reps. And I've sat down with the coaches already, and we have a plan for that. But I don't think it's a season where you just say, hey, I'm getting my starters ready. I think that may not be smart. Darryl, I think what is obvious to me is that guys worked very hard in this offseason, both physically and mentally. I think watching the walkthroughs, watching the coaches interact with the players, there is a good understanding of what we want to do. Now, I'll steal a line. I talked to Coach Kubiak the other night, and he said it, and it's right. The teaching is ahead of the doing right now. So we had a really good offseason of teaching. We've had a ton of meetings to this point. And now with these walkthroughs, we're finally doing. So just to see the guys walk through techniques, and I mean, literally walk through. We're having a period where these guys are not moving very fast, but they're getting the body to get through the football movements is really important. So I've just been impressed with what the guys have been able to retain going back to the spring. And then, like we talked about, the guys attacked the offseason in the weight room and showed up in really good shape. Yeah, I think the walkthroughs are awesome. I mean, we need to. There are meetings on the field at a minimum, So we're outside, which is beneficial, and we're lining up. Now we're also lining up. We're spreading out. We're being safe early here in camp. But yeah, I think, Scott, there's a progression to teaching. We've certainly had a lot of the meeting room part of this. But then you always want to walk through before you do something full speed. So that's kind of this works out really nicely in our teaching progression.
Kevin Stefanski addressing the media today. Let's welcome in Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com and the plain dealer, Dan Labbe. Dan, you were in on that Zoom call. What did you take away from what Kevin Stefanski said?
It sounded like he was really happy to have guys on the football field, even if it doesn't look like a real football practice yet. He was just happy to have guys out there going through motions, working on this install. Everything has been virtual to this point. And when they have been in the building, he hasn't really been allowed to coach them. So when they showed up for that strength and conditioning stuff, he wasn't even allowed to coach these guys or even watch them out of his window. So he's excited to, I think, be coaching these guys and see what they can do. And, starting next week, they're going to move to some in-person meetings on top of these walkthroughs, and they're actually really starting to ramp up to a real training camp.
The other thing that we found out is the opt-outs are now official. Deadline was yesterday, Thursday at 4 o'clock. The Browns, the second most in the NFL, as they had 5 guys, 4 of them offensive linemen, 3 of those 4 guards. And Andrew Billings, another guy that was likely going to be a starter, big contributor on the defensive side of the ball. How big of a void is there now at offensive guard for the Browns with 3 of those guys opting out?
It's more of a depth issue, I think, because most of those guys outside of Drew Forbes, you didn't really have in your mind as competing at that guard position. Drew Forbes was a guy that would have had an opportunity, but at the same time, I don't even know if you looked at him as a guy that was going to win that job. I actually think Andrew Billings is the guy that stands out to me that you're going to miss the most. But as far as the offensive line is concerned, you still have, the guy who ended last year as your starter. I still think Nick Harris is going to have something to say about that position before the end of training camp. I find it really hard to believe this team drafted a backup center, especially after what Kevin Stefanski had to say about J.C. Tretter today. I think Harris will have a say in that. So the good news is, yes, they had the second most opt-outs, but it wasn't like the guys in New England who opted out, who were starters, guys you were going to count on. A lot of these guys were depth guys, and some of them might not have even made the roster.
Yeah, the Patriots had the most with 8 guys that opted out. You mentioned Billings, and again, I don't think anybody should criticize any of these guys for opting out. That's a personal thing. It's a health thing. You certainly have to understand the thought process. And the Browns, to their credit, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry have said that. We understand the concerns. Billings is a guy that, they really were counting on to be that middle run stuffer guy and maybe even get some pressure on the quarterback that this defense has lacked.
Yeah, it's no coincidence, too, that the guys who opted out for the Browns were the bigger guys, right? The offensive lineman and the defensive lineman. We know that's a higher risk category. Just the reality of it is there's the personal side of it, and no one's going to criticize that. But we also have to talk about it in a football light. And in the football light, Andrew Billings, it really hurts this football team that he's not here. He's a guy they obviously liked. They signed him away from Cincinnati. I was really interested to see how he would fit in this defensive tackle rotation. I think he's a guy that really can be a strong run stopper and really could have helped this team in that regard. So now they just have to find someone else to step into that rotation. It's the next man up mentality of the NFL. You've got Larry Ogunjobi and Sheldon Richardson. You drafted Jordan Elliott. It puts a little more pressure on him. And now you just need to maybe find that fourth guy because they do want to have a strong rotation along that defensive line.
The other thing is Kevin Stefanski mentioned the walkthroughs. Those are critical at this point because they can physically get out on the football field and see what the alignment looks like and where they're supposed to be. For any first-year head coach trying to install a new system like the Browns are, both offense and defense, I got to imagine these are critical times for them.
It's huge. And for players, it's, we know everybody learns differently. Some guys probably see it in the playbook or heard this in virtual meetings and it worked for them. Other guys, maybe that goes in one ear and out the other, or they just can't envision it. So to be able to go out there and feel it, to kind of feel where you're supposed to stand, to look to your left and look to your right and see what it's going to look like when you're lined up in a certain formation and to get an idea of what Kevin Stefanski's offense looks like as opposed to just hearing about it and being told about it or seeing it drawn on a piece of paper. You actually get to go out there and feel it. And I think that's a really important step for this team. And then it's just going to get, better and better because now you're going to get to have contact and you're going to get to actually run some things at close to full speed.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We'll step aside, take a quick time out, but we are nowhere near done with talking Cleveland Browns. Training camp gets rolling. Ramped up a little bit more next Friday, but plenty of news coming out of Berea as Kevin Stefanski addressed the media. More Browns talk when we return. More sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art BetAmerica kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 614-350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a 4-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition continues. We're going to continue talking Cleveland Browns. Training camp gets underway with the first full squad workout next Friday. But the Browns have been undergoing what's being termed an acclimation period. So a lot of strength and conditioning, as well as some of those important walkthroughs where they install the offense and the defense that Dan and I talked about last segment. The other thing that the Browns have done is they had a media day of sorts. They put on their new uniforms, their crisp, clean, old-style new uniforms, and got ready to do some videos for the scoreboard for the 2020 season.
Now the dog Brown, let's go!
Myles Garrett obviously ready to get back on the field and get things rolling. The dog pound no doubt will be behind him now that he is a Brown for the next several years. Quarterback Baker Mayfield, he's a little more subdued in his scoreboard cameo. Here's first-round pick Jedrick Wills moving over to left tackle, and he's ready to get to work. Jarvis Landry shows he's got good hands. He's working to get back to full strength. Plenty of strength and conditioning work going on the last few days. Myles Garrett, he's ready to do the heavy lifting. Odell Beckham, hey, he looks pretty quick even in slow motion. David Njoku working on the hand-eye coordination with the tennis balls. And Nick Chubb getting ready to be able to run the football as much as Kevin Stefanski wants him to. The Browns will have their first full squad workout next Friday, August 14th. Time to welcome back in Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. Dan, you can kind of sense Kevin Stefanski excited where they are, but really wants to get that full squad workout where they start doing more and more of the football things underway.
Yeah, of what your team looks like. You know, if you can't get them on the field, put them in pads, put them in helmets. You know, ultimately these guys are going to have to go play football. So you've got to put them in those football situations. And, you know, I even asked him, are you a little, you know, do you have a good idea of sort of your depth chart or who might go first, who might go second in some of these reps and these areas where there's competition? And I think that's something that they've still got to get figured out because you didn't have an off-season program to see how guys looked and maybe who was ahead of somebody else. So, you know, everything's moving real fast. They're cramming essentially their off-season on-field program into 2 weeks. It's normally about, you know, a month and a half. And then they're going to try and cram a full training camp into about 2 or 3 weeks. So everything's accelerating really quickly here.
The area of the defense, there are a lot of guys now that they drafted that are going to have some opportunities. So that's going to be interesting to see how quickly they can get acclimated. You think in terms of Delpit, Phillips, Elliott that you mentioned with Billings opting out, these guys are going to have legitimate shots at playing significant playing time.
And they've got to do it, you know, again, very quickly. Normally rookies even get a little more time. They get to show up right after the draft and have an extra rookie mini camp. And those rules are different. They can have a little contact. They can actually play some real football. They missed out on that. They usually get to stay in the facility, you know, till the end of June, and they have a rookie kind of initiation program for the NFL where you learn sort of how to be an NFL player on and off the field, and these rookies missed out on that. So this is sort of their first taste of real NFL life. So if a guy's able to kind of hit the ground running, it's going to say a lot about who he is, not just as a player, but as a person as well, because they're making a lot of adjustments here on the fly.
The other thing, which of these rookies on the defensive side of the ball do you think might be a sneaky one to keep an ear out for and see how they develop?
The guy I really am looking at is a guy I mentioned earlier, Jordan Elliott. He's a guy that I don't know if fans sort of knew where some draft analysts had him ranked, and Pro Football Focus had him in their top 30 of overall players. We're not talking defensive linemen or defensive players, we're talking overall. He was actually top 25 on Pro Football Focus's big board. I think Dane Brugler had him really high among defensive linemen. So the Browns really got a guy that if he lives up to some of those expectations could end up being a steal. And now with Billings opting out, Jordan Elliott becomes even more important. If you go back and just watch some of his highlights from Missouri, he can get in the backfield and create pressure up the middle. And that's something that this front office and this coaching staff really values.
Do you get a sense of how the defense might look under Joe Woods? We've talked probably a little bit more than most people would like with the lack of experience at linebacking. Is that something that Joe Woods schemes around, you think?
I would imagine we're going to see a lot of safeties on the field. We might see some 3 safety sets, sort of like what we saw last year a little bit with Steve Wilks, especially when Jermaine Whitehead was still around. They used him a lot as that 3rd safety. I think we'll see some of that. I think the points of emphasis are really pressure, create lots of pressure on the quarterback, and then let your secondary make plays and force turnovers. That's really what they want to do. And then the middle of that defense with the linebackers, hey, they're going to get tested right away. When they have to face Lamar Jackson out of the gate, we'll see if they're able to kind of overcome some of those deficiencies that they have at that position. But I think the emphasis for this front office and this staff has been your front 4 and your back 4 or 5.
If you were going to say a position group defensively, boy, if these guys do what we think they can do, this defense will be okay. And I'm going to flip it and ask you offensively too. But let's start with the defense. If there's a position group you think these guys are good, we're looking at a pretty good football team.
It's got to be safety. You could also make the case for corner. You could say the whole secondary, but just to drill down, I think it's safety. You got Carl Joseph that you brought in, kind of a bet on himself deal, and you've got Grant Delpit. Those are probably going to be your 2 guys starting. And if those 2 guys perform well in this defense and complement Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams, and also Kevin Johnson if he's playing nickel, I think that takes this defense to the next level.
Let's flip it and say offense. There's a lot of talent by any estimations on that offense, particularly at the skill positions. What position do you think, boy, if this position on the offensive side of the ball does what we think it can do, or what we think he can do, where do you think the key is on the offensive side of the ball?
There's a lot of ways you could go with this. Offensive line is kind of an easy one, but I'm going to go with the receiving group. We know what Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. are, but Odell had a little bit of a down year last year, even though he had 1,000 yards. Jarvis is coming off an injury, but then you have a guy like, say, a Donovan Peoples-Jones. What if he comes out and is one of the fastest guys on the field, creates a downfield threat as a 3rd receiver? Maybe you can do some different things with him. I just think however that wide receiver group shakes out, if those guys can really perform well, and then you throw in that play action, you throw in the ability for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to run the football, you could really cause some problems.
Dan Labbe, beat reporter for the Cleveland Browns here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We appreciate the insight. Step aside. Take one more time out. When we return, Dan and I are going to talk about a guy who might have as much to prove as anybody for the Browns in 2020. More Browns talk straight ahead on More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Stay with us.
Wow! Get Nature's Stone and never replace your garage flooring again. Act now for huge summer savings on our exclusive Nature's Blend Stone, as low as $2.99 a square foot plus installation. Only Nature's Stone eliminates cracked, uneven concrete, and Nature's Stone never peels like cheap paints and coatings. Safe, beautiful garage flooring that's always backed by Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty. Schedule your free cost estimate easily online today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor.
Wow, it's Nature's Stone.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget, Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
More sports and less. Levine, the weekend winners edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to keep talking Browns. Baker Mayfield is out in Berea and by all indications ready to go. Mayfield came into camp this year, by all accounts, in great shape, ready to improve from what was a disappointing second season in the NFL by his standards. One thing is certain, his new head coach, Kevin Stefanski, has been very impressed with his new quarterback.
I went down to see Baker March prior to everything going crazy. So that was really our first time to get in person and talk about life and get to know each other, if you will, down in Austin. So from that moment until now, I've been very impressed with Baker. He is all ball. He understands his role. He understands what we want him to do in this offense. He's doing it on the field, just watching him get through the cadence and kind of line people up. Very impressed with him. I know Andrew mentioned, how the shape he came in, and it's really impressive. He did a nice job, and that just doesn't happen. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and he clearly has done the work. Your job is to make other people better, number one. And in order to do that, you really have to get to know guys, and you got to know what makes them tick. And I think one of his strong suits is understanding his peers, his teammates, and he works at it. So that is definitely a strong suit of his. Yeah, I think just that relationship, as everybody knows, the head coach quarterback relationship is important. I hope to travel to see many different people, in the off seasons. But I just felt like it was important for me to sit face to face with him, meet his family, kind of get to know each other, and that's something that I will continue to do. And that's really been, that was a charge going back to March, and even now the charge is we got to get to know each other real quick, and we want to come together as a team. And part of that is we really got to work. I have to work hard at it. Our coaches, our players have to work hard at getting to know each other in a bunch of different ways, so that we can, come together and get ready to go practice and play. And there's just this element when you are virtual, when you do have two separate locker rooms, when you have the plexiglass up, you have to work extra hard to come together.
Kevin Stefanski talking about his quarterback, Baker Mayfield. Let's welcome in Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as for the Plain Dealer, Dan Labbe. And Dan, it's a big year for Baker Mayfield. We've talked about it. He seems to think it's a big year for him. That's the reason you come in ready to go the way that he has, and pretty much has impressed everybody within the organization.
It seems like it. And we also heard from Austin Hooper earlier this week, and he said that Baker Mayfield was a big reason why he wanted to come play in Cleveland. He loved his arm talent and his swagger and all of that. And as far as Baker being in shape, this is one of those things where, I wish we could have been out there to see it, but as you kind of follow along on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, earlier we saw Browns players posing in their uniforms for their media day, and Baker does look different. He looks different than he did last year, and he kind of admitted at one point last year that he put on more weight to maybe be able to take some more hits, and it appears that's gone. And the focus that Baker has, or at least appears to have to this point, as Kevin Stefanski said, he's all ball. That's a really good sign for the Browns heading into this, and it just shows the importance for Stefanski to go to Austin and meet with Baker Mayfield and talk to him almost right away in this process. It just shows how important the Browns know this year is for him.
The other thing that we found out is Jarvis Landry was on the physically unable to perform list, but that was to be expected. It's not like there's been a setback. Odell Beckham has been out and doing things. we expect Landry to be healthy as well. That's correct, right?
Yeah, and when Jarvis was talking about at the end of last season the possibility of surgery, he mentioned it would probably be about an 8-month recovery. So when he made the decision to have that surgery, it really put his timeline mid-August or end of August. But everything we've seen from Jarvis, including the purple hair in that video you saw earlier, seems to indicate he's in a good place. He should be ready to get on the field at some point. And if there's one guy that you just don't have to worry about getting himself ready and showing up ready, it's Jarvis Landry. This is a guy that has not missed a game in his NFL career. I don't think he wants that streak to end. It may ultimately not be up to him if his recovery slows a little bit. But I would be surprised if we don't see Jarvis back and looking like Jarvis pretty quickly.
The other thing that will be real interesting to see in Kevin Stefanski's offense, a part of Jarvis's game that's really undervalued is for a guy that's a wide receiver, he can block and is not only good at it, he's willing to do that.
He loves it. He loves to go out there and hit somebody. And sometimes he's crossed the line there, but that's part of the business, I guess. If you want to be a wide receiver blocking, he's really a guy that you can count on in that run game. And I think what you love about it is it's not just him going out and blocking a cornerback 10 yards down the field. He'll come in and mix it up on the line. He'll get a linebacker or someone like that. He's not afraid. He's an absolutely fearless football player.
The other thing that we've talked a little bit about is the upgrade at the offensive line position. Beyond Wyatt Teller, who is it? Chris Hubbard? Who are you looking at? And I know we'll know for sure next Friday when they start trotting people out. But who are the candidates to be that right guard?
You mentioned Hubbard. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. But the name I just keep coming back to, and it's one I mentioned a little earlier, is Nick Harris. They drafted him in the 5th round, and he's a center. He played center his last 2 years in college, but he's also got experience at guard. And they have J.C. Tretter, who just signed an extension. He's still in the prime of his career. I just don't think there's any rush to move on from J.C. Tretter. So did they really draft a guy to be their backup center, which is really, if you need a backup center, you can go find somebody. I think Nick Harris is going to have something to say about this right guard battle before all is said and done. I think he's going to get a chance, and if he's ready to go, it wouldn't surprise me if he's the starter on September 13th. I think Wyatt Teller's your front runner sort of by default, but I'm just keeping an eye on Nick Harris.
The more you hear people talk about it, Jedrick Wills with the Browns, I think the more comfort you find in him being able to make that transition to left tackle. That's not an easy thing to do, but it sure seems like they're going to find a way to have Jedrick Wills be as successful as possible.
And the good thing is you signed Jack Conklin on the right side, so you don't have to worry about that side of the line. So if you have to devote some resources maybe to helping out your left tackle, and he's got as good a left guard as there is in football in Joel Bitonio next to him, you can stick a tight end over there if you absolutely need to. Ultimately, it's going to be on Jedrick Wills to take those steps to be a guy who eventually can be on an island and protect the quarterback's blind side. But you can at least trust Jack Conklin to do that a little bit on the right side. So maybe you can sort of, shade some things over to help Jedrick out as he's getting ready. And the really good thing for him is he's got a great offensive line coach in Bill Callahan. If you want anybody teaching him how to make that transition, it's Bill Callahan.
With all the things that Kevin Stefanski and any first-year head coach with a new system has to deal with, how important is it to survive the first couple weeks of the season? Because I would imagine for all the first-year head coaches with new systems, the growth between probably the first week and the third week is going to be huge, probably significantly more so than any other of the franchises.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And in the NFL especially anymore, those first 4 games have almost for some teams become an extension of the preseason. We see teams all the time that get off to slow starts, and then they kind of really get going in November and December. Seattle is a team that's just absolutely known for doing that every year. For the Browns, they've got a tough matchup out of the gate. We all know that. You're playing Baltimore, who is absolutely loaded again. They know who they are. They know what they want to do. They have every advantage in the books. So, if the Browns come out and lose that game to Baltimore, okay, shrug it off. Now you got to go play a Thursday night game against Cincinnati, and we'll get a really good idea of where you are if you can turn around and beat the Bengals, who are a team you should beat. So for Stefanski, it's just going to be about keeping that focus on the long game. It's not necessarily about what happened just this last Sunday. It's a 16-game schedule. Let's just take that in chunks and see where this team ends up at the end of December.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com as well as the Plain Dealer. We always appreciate the insight. It all gets rolling a week from today with the first full squad workout. I'm sure we will be bugging you repeatedly. Appreciate the time, Dan. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Again, Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter. Well, you see, if you want to get in contact with us, comments or questions, MSLWeekendWinner@gmail.com, MSLLWeekendWinner@gmail.com. Time for us to take a quick time out. When we return, we shift gears a little bit. Football, college football, Buckeyes college football. Straight ahead, when more sports and less Levine, the Weekend Winners edition continues. Stay with us.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a four-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
Well, hello, everyone. Let me tell you a little bit about Browns Football Insider. For only $3.99 a month, you can get text sent right to your phone each day from me, Dan Labbe, Scott Pasco, and Ellis Williams. In addition to that, you'll receive a Football Insider newsletter every day with special things from us, things that you won't see anywhere else on the site. You'll get breaking news, analysis, features, film breakdown, and things like that. Texting us directly gives you a great chance to cut through the clutter of Facebook, Twitter, other social media, and avoid the trolls. Also, it's the only way to get your questions on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So why should you sign up? Try a 14-day free trial. You can cancel at any time. All it takes is one text, but you won't want to cancel. We have hundreds of subscribers join us over the last year. They love it and have stayed with us. We're seeing the Football Insider community grow every week. And it's only $3.99 a month, which is less than 14 cents a day. What I like most about Football Insider is the opportunity to connect with you one-on-one and really communicate with you. So how can you become a Football Insider? You can click on cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Or easier yet, text me at 216-208-3965. Again, that's 216-208-3965.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant, whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at SmileyOne.com.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners edition. I'm Dave Bacon. We've talked some NFL football. We're going to shift focus a little bit and move to the college game. The Big Ten has announced they are going to go with a conference-only schedule this season. Let's take a look at the Buckeyes' 2020 updated schedule. You see the Michigan game moved up to October 24th, earliest it's been played in a long, long time. They add Purdue on the road. That hasn't ended well recently, a couple of times for the Buckeyes. But the thing to keep in mind, conference-only games, 10 of them, and in a 13-week period, so there's some built-in buys. Let's welcome in cleveland.com columnist, longtime cover of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Doug Lesmerises. Doug joins us from his car. We appreciate the immediacy, Doug. Let's talk a little bit about this conference-only schedule. What do you take of that, and do you think college football, particularly at the Big Ten level, happens this year?
Well, Ohio State has started preseason practice in the last couple days. Their first day was Thursday. Here on Friday is their second day. this is the big time to me, that they're out there. Ryan Day has said, the players aren't wearing masks under their helmet, right? They're going to interact with each other. So when you talk about, is there going to be a college football season, we have to see what happens a week from now once they have all this personal contact. Are you going to have a gazillion guys test positive? If you do, then I don't think you're going to have college football. If you can have regular contact and you have this testing and you can, keep a bunch of guys from getting positive tests, then I think you have a shot at it. So the Big Ten going conference only, they want to, it's not just geographic, it's that everybody knows each other. You can have common rules. So I think this schedule makes a lot of sense. A lot of other conferences are pushing back and not starting until late September. The Big Ten's going to start that planned first week. And so they had to make some adjustments, but are they going to have it? I think in the next week, we're going to get a much better sense of that. But for now, I'm certainly assuming we're going to have a college football season.
The other thing that has happened, the Big Ten Conference had a media conference call and a little bit of a dust up. You kind of makes you wish they had like pay-per-view for these things between Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. I'm assuming you're not surprised. In what did you make of that? And take us through kind of the history with that.
So it wasn't a media conference call. It was just a call among the coaches in the league. And what's come out of that is reporting from Dave Biddle at Bucknuts, who reported that Jim Harbaugh on the call with all the coaches questioned whether Ohio State maybe had a coach on the field when they weren't supposed to. And basically, according to Dave's report, Ryan Day said, how about you worry about your team and I'll worry about my team? And then after the fact, Ryan Day went into a meeting with Ohio State players and said, I hope the Big Ten has a mercy rule this year because we're going to hang 100 on Michigan. So I wrote about that. We talked about it a lot on our Buckeye Talk podcast this week. It's the idea of searching for an edge, constantly searching for an edge in this rivalry. And maybe Jim Harbaugh had a very valid point, but a lot of this is spin. A lot of it is how you present it to your team. Urban Meyer was always a master motivator, especially when it came to rivalry games. And so here we are in early August. Ohio State is a national title favorite. They're certainly the Big Ten favorite. They've won 15 out of 16 in the rivalry. And yet here we go. Ryan Day found a way to get his team mad at Michigan, right? When you're favored to do everything, you look for an edge. Ryan Day is always looking for an edge. So that, I think, is the most interesting thing. Can Jim Harbaugh have his team have a similar sort of edge? But the idea that Ohio State is always thinking about Michigan, and here one day into preseason practice, they're thinking about him again and they're ticked off.
It's curious that that would be the forum where you would bring up something like that. I mean, don't you find it that? There are probably better ways to make the Big Ten aware of that other than with all of the coaches from the league on a call.
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't listen to it. I mean, the point to me is certainly there are ways to report something like that. You can call the Big Ten and report it or however you want to do it. But if that came out somehow, then I think Ohio State fans would be like, oh, Jim Harbaugh's telling on us, right? So I don't know. Maybe if you want to say it like, hey, you say it to the guy's face or as close to his face as you can. You say it in a public forum because you don't want it to make it seem like I'm saying this behind your back. I mean, you could spin it as very straightforward. Again, it's all the spin. So I don't know. This is our interpretation of how Ryan Day has handled it with his team. We don't know what Jim Harbaugh has or hasn't said to his team, but you look for motivation in every nook and cranny. So I don't know necessarily that Jim Harbaugh was wrong here, but Ryan Day sure seems to have reversed it and found a way to make this something to stoke the fires of his players.
Shift gears a little bit. We heard when they initially announced a conference-only schedule that some of the players in the Big Ten had some concerns, safety concerns for them. Certainly they're allowed to. Where does that stand? And it seemed like the league was certainly willing to listen to them and try to address the players' concerns about safety and testing and the like.
So I think it's important to draw some distinctions here. The Pac-12 started this. They had a letter where hundreds of Pac-12 players supported that. Then the Big Ten was next. It has now moved to the Mountain West. But the Big Ten letter was specific about COVID-19 testing, safety, and protocols. The Pac-12 was talking about revenue sharing, social justice issues, don't cut sports. They were talking about the idea of fundamentally changing college football. And the Pac-12 letter, there was, I don't know if you want to use the word threat, but they said if these demands aren't met, we might sit out. The Big Ten letter was only about COVID safety, and there was not a threat to sit out. Threat might be the wrong word, but it's all about negotiating, and negotiations and trying to get some leverage. So the Big Ten players and all players want a seat at the table. So much of what they have asked for, the Big Ten and schools like Ohio State are going down that road anyway. But it's different to go down that road alone. The adults who are getting paid make a decision and tell the players this is how it's going to be, as opposed to the adults and then the players who are unpaid and are the ones actually risking their bodies and brains. They're part of the process. So what the Big Ten players want to be is part of the process. So I do think Kevin Warren, the new Big Ten commissioner, seems to have been open to that. I don't think this is a sea change that's going to change college football overnight, but you've got to start somewhere. And this is the beginning of a negotiation, and you can't negotiate if you're not together. So the idea that Big Ten players are united in any way, they're not a union yet, but the idea of unity, that is important in this step. But I think it's important for people to realize from the Big Ten angle, it's very specific. They want to make sure the schools are being as cautious and as safe as possible in the COVID-19 era.
Doug Lesmerises, columnist from cleveland.com, with some insight on what's going on with Ohio State and the Big Ten. As always, Doug, appreciate the insight. Stay safe. Thanks for the time.
Dave, I'll be by to pick you up in my minivan in a minute.
I want the front seat. I got shotgun.
No problem.
All right. Doug Lesmerises joining us from his minivan, immediacy here on the Weekend Winners edition. Well, that'll do it for this edition of More Sports and the Weekend Winners. We will be back next Friday. Remember, Les Levine in the chair Monday from 6 to 7. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you again next weekend.